There's a 95-year-old man in Omaha, Nebraska, who still lives in the same house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. He eats breakfast at McDonald's, he drinks 5 Cokes a day, and he's worth roughly $150 billion. Now, here's the strange part. If you walked up to Warren Buffett today and asked him what to do with your $10,000, he'd give you an answer that contradicts almost everything he personally did to become Warren Buffett. The greatest stock picker in human history would tell you, with a completely straight face, not to pick stocks. And then, in the same breath, he'd tell you that if he had your $10,000 instead of his hundreds of billions, he could earn returns that would make Wall Street's best hedge funds look like amateurs. Both statements are true. And understanding why they're both true is worth more than any stock tip you'll ever get. Because this isn't really a video about Warren Buffett, it's a video about which of his 2 answers belongs to you. My name is Nick, and I've spent way too much time reading shareholder letters written by a man who eats the same McDonald's breakfast every morning. If you've ever stared at a brokerage account wondering whether you're supposed to be doing something financial advice, this is me walking you through what the most successful investor of all time has actually said, in his own words, about exactly this question. And he's said a lot because people have been asking him some version of, "What would you do with my money?" for about 70 years. The fascinating thing is that he gives 2 completely different answers depending on who's asking. There's the public answer, the one he wrote into his own will, and there's the personal answer, the one he gives when someone asks what he would do if he woke up tomorrow with a small amount of money and no reputation. We're going to take them in order because the boring answer comes with math that is anything but boring. Let's start with the strongest piece of evidence that exists in personal finance. When Warren Buffett dies, the cash left to his wife goes into a trust. And in his 2013 shareholder letter, he told the world exactly what instructions he left for it. Quote, "Put 10% of the cash in short-term government bonds and 90% in a very low-cost S&P 500 index fund. I suggest Vanguard's." That's it. That's the whole strategy. The man who built a $1 trillion company through legendary stock picking looked at the question of how to invest money for the person he loves most. And his answer was the most boring product in finance. An index fund, the thing your HR department offers you, the thing finance bros on TikTok call cope. And here's the thing, this wasn't theoretical for him. He bet money on it, real money, publicly against professionals. In 2008, Buffett made a $500,000 wager with a hedge fund firm called Protégé Partners. The bet was simple. Over 10 years, a plain Vanguard S&P 500 index fund would beat a hand-picked basket of 5 hedge funds of funds, the smartest money managers in the world, charging premium fees with armies of analysts versus a fund that does literally nothing but own 500 companies and go to sleep. 10 years later, the do-nothing fund had returned 125.8%. The hedge funds averaged 2.2% per year. One of them did so badly it returned 2.8% over the entire decade. $1 million in the hedge funds gained about $220,000. The same million in the index fund gained $854,000. The hedge fund manager conceded early. It wasn't close. It was the financial equivalent of bringing a Formula One pit crew to a race and getting lapped by a guy in a Camry on cruise control. So when Buffett says, and this is a direct quote from a Berkshire annual meeting, "I do not think the average person can pick stocks," he's not being condescending. He's telling you that the professionals, the people whose entire job is picking stocks, can't reliably do it either after fees. The index isn't the participation trophy. The index is the trophy. But hold on. Before Buffett would put a single dollar of your $10,000 into anything, he'd ask you one question, and your answer might end the conversation immediately. Do you have credit card debt? At the 2020 annual meeting, a woman asked him how to invest, and his answer had nothing to do with stocks. He said, quote, "If I owed any money at 18%, the first thing I'd do with any money I had would be to pay it off. It's going to be way better than any investment idea I've got." And then he added the line that should be tattooed on every credit card ever printed. "I don't know how to make 18%. Sit with that." The man who compounded money at roughly 20% a year for 60 years, the best sustained track record in recorded history, is telling you he cannot reliably beat your credit card's interest rate. Paying off a card charging 24% APR is a guaranteed, risk-free, tax-free 24% return. There is no stock, no fund, no crypto coin, no real estate course sold from a rented Lamborghini that offers that. So if part of your $10,000 is sitting next to a credit card balance, Buffett's answer is brutally simple. The debt eats first. Step 2 of his boring checklist, cash you can actually reach. Buffett is famously obsessed with never being forced to sell at a bad time, and the household version of that is an emergency fund. And here's a rare piece of good news in 2026. Boring cash finally pays. High-yield savings accounts are paying 4 to 5% right now, and short-term treasury bills are in the same neighborhood. For the first time in almost 2 decades, the responsible adult portion of your money isn't just sitting there losing to inflation, it's working. Not hard exactly, more like a teenager with a summer job, but working, okay? Debts handled, emergency funds parked. Now the $10,000 goes in, 90% into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund, 10% into short-term treasuries per the man's own will. And I know what you're thinking. 10 grand in an index fund? That's it? That's the secret from the greatest investor alive? Where's the alpha, Nick? Let me show you where the alpha is, because this is where the math gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean genuinely hard to believe. The S&P 500 has returned about 10% a year on average over the long run. At that rate, your $10,000 becomes roughly $26,000